God.
Hello. I think we just went live, which I must admit it was a bit exciting for me. And especially because, yes, I've been very much looking forward to this event. So I really want to warmly welcome everybody. I can see that the participant number raised, and that makes my self-confidence also get soothed a bit. And this is just to let you know that we are recording because we thought that it would be nice to have at the end of the series all these recordings and like a collection of talk. I wish we could go material with this collection of talks and make a pink box with a ribbon, but also I guess Ania will say something about how material and immaterial when it comes to love, how love matters. And so this gives me the chance to thank Ania Malinowska for joining us, and Mark Deuze. Ania is at the University of Silesia in Poland, and Mark is at the University of Amsterdam. I think perhaps a few of you in the audience already know them and their work, but if not, this is just to let you know they are super cool scholars and also super cool people. So let me try to be a bit more professional here and offer you a proper introduction to our speakers of today. You are at the Media Love Dialogue. We are kicking off our Summer of Love series. I think we really need a summer of love after a winter of terror and hate. And so considering that clubs are still shut, at least in the UK, then we can well indulge in some digital eros, digital romance, whatever it means. We are here to try understanding what it may mean. So Ania Malinowska is an author and a cultural theorist, and she's an associate professor in media and cultural studies at the University of Silesia in Poland. And also she's a former senior Fulbright fellow at the New School of Social Research in New York. So this is one of those bios bits that make you like, oh, I need to do more in order to, make it. So well done. and her research concentrates on cultural theory, love studies, digital humanities, and critical robotics, and specifically on the formations of cultural norms and the social, emotional, and aesthetic codes in relation to digitalism. So you can see why we were very happy that she accepted our invitation. She's just perfect for being here today. She wrote a very great book published in 2017, Media and Emotion, the New Frontiers of Affect in Digital Culture. And also I think she credited the Materiality of Love, a series of essays that was one of the inspiration also for this series. And at the moment, and this is what I really can't wait to know more about, she's preparing the manuscript of a book, which is titled, let me find it in my notes here.
Love in Contemporary Technoculture.
You see.
Which has been submitted already to Cambridge University Press, fingers crossed. It's forthcoming.
Wow, that's very good. That's very good. And I guess today you will let us know something more, a bit of a teaser for the book. And then Mark, welcome Mark. Actually, Mark organized a seminar on media love, a workshop on media love a few months ago, and I participated to that workshop, and I was very pleased and very inspired to see that someone was working on similar lines of those that I was working on. And then that's why I'm very happy that Mark is here for this launching event, because his seminar, his workshop was really played an important role in inspiring this line of inquiry for me, and in sort of reassuring me in a sense that, okay, this is something that there is quite an interest around it. So Mark is a professor of media studies at the University of Amsterdam. And before, he worked as a journalist and an academic in the United States, in Germany, and in South Africa. But perhaps more importantly, we won't have time to explore this now, but maybe another time. Is a bass player and singer of the Skin Flower. So next time we have to have like a soundtrack, like a jingle, something like that. Because we are not only what we write, we are also what we sing. This is very important. So his research focuses broadly on what influences how media get made and thus the way culture is produced in society. And additionally, his work considers the relationships between the individual and society in the context of the life lived in rather than media. So I think that Mark played a very important role in media studies in approaching the topic of our relationship with media as a very immersive and tangled one, kind of away from these utilitaristic or instrumental vision of media as objects separated from us. So what does it mean to live in media? And now, well, indeed, he published a book, Making Media, Beyond Journalism, and others. And at the moment, he has a forthcoming book for policy, Media Love, which gives also the title to this talk to an extent, and also Life in Media, scheduled for 2022. So we can see how his line of research is really kind of, pushing a bit the boundaries about how we can think of our relationship with media, of our life and love in media. Hence, without further ado, well, perhaps I should present myself. I'm Carolina Bandinelli, and yes, true. And since I was a little girl, I have been wondering, what is love? And because I couldn't really tackle this metaphysical universal question as it is, I decided to enter by the media window or the media door, also because I'm a media scholar, a cultural media scholar. So in the last few years, I've been researching the digital cultures of love, especially how people interact and relate to dating apps and what kind of libidinal investment is attached to it. And I decided to curate this series at the Center for Digital Inquiry at Warwick. We have Nate, the director of the center here, invisible but visible, the Deleuzian Nate today. And yes, I decided to curate this series because I wanted to listen to the most inspiring ideas and from the most inspiring thinkers out there to sort of create my dream summer school. So in my dream, we would be at a festival, I don't know, in some kind of seaside place, and there would be a DJ set with an opening act by the Skin Flowers. But we are not, we are on Zoom, we are digital. It is a good thing because more people can attend than if we were sort of in person. So let's enjoy it. And shall I actually leave the floor to our speakers? And feel free to write a chat in the Q&A section and also to use the chat to interact with us and with each other. And without further ado, Mark, please tell us something more. What is media love?
Hi, Carolina. Hi, Anna. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me, for having us, for being online. I know we're all inundated with these Zoom, Teams, and whatever sessions, both live and in postponed viewing context. So I really appreciate everybody checking this out. And I would encourage, not just because we love Carolina, but I would encourage everyone to stick with it this entire seminar, this entire summer of love. The lineup for the upcoming weeks and months is truly phenomenal. I'll be there every single time. So making notes for my book. So and what I prepared for today is, as you said, Carolina, I mean, I had the privilege of writing 2 books for Polity Press, one called Media Life, the other Media Work. And, you know, as a true fan of Peter Jackson, I always wondered what the third one would be, right? You have to have a trilogy. And so it was kind of obvious that the third one should be about love, and the most fundamental of all human emotions and experiences. But like you, Carolina, I had no idea. Where do you start? Where do you begin? And I started collecting books about love. I mean, if you go to my apartment in Amsterdam, you come and visit me, you go to the hallway and there's my bookshelves, and it's just books with love in the title, which is kind of creepy. But and then only recently I actually found out that love is its own discipline. Love studies. I honestly did not know that, and I've learned a great deal from diving into that literature. And of course, since the last 5 to 10 years or so in media studies, our field, we are beginning carefully to explore this terrain as well. So generally buried under all kinds of rather difficult, oblique concepts like affect or something like that, right? We can't say love. I mean, affect sounds a bit more intense. But so yeah, so there is this thing that is bubbling up in all kinds of different ways. And what I want to do is I prepared a little slideshow with some interesting, I hope, images. I'm going to talk through that for about 15 to 20 minutes or so. And please, this is a conversation starter. I don't have a definition, sort of like this is what it is and this is how it's going to be. I'm exploring this. I'm here to learn, very much so. And in general, you could argue that what I'm presenting to you is at the moment what I think will be in my book. I'm only at the start of it. I'm currently writing 2 books, as you said, Carolina. The reason for that is, this is true. The week that the lockdown started in the Netherlands, my band was booked to go into the studio to record a new album. And so we haven't been able to do it yet. So yeah, I mean, otherwise we would have been on tour and I would have no time for books because it would be, you know, festivals and drugs and groupies and everything. But no, I have to write books. But anyways, no, of course, nobody would listen, and that's fine too. We're just a bunch of old friends having a lot of fun, making lots of noise. Okay, right. I'll share my screen and please stop me at some point too, because that's I generally speak to it. I hope you can all see my slides. Yeah, great. Okay, so oh, by the way, most of the images you'll see in the background are images taken by a very dear friend of mine, Piet Hermans, who's a photographer, who will also supply the photography for my new book with MIT Press, Life and Media. So I'm really excited about that. I want to talk about media love, all the different ways in which we love media, and the different ways and different roles that media play in our love life. And of course, love can be romantic love, it can be desire or loss, it can be love, you know, as a form of care or compassion, it could be love for the world. But so love in the widest possible sense of the word. Love as a collection of obviously quite profound human emotions. That are projected onto our media, our devices or characters in the media, as well as manifested through our use of media. And so I just want to explore all the different ways we encounter love in these instances. In a way, this entire summer of love is you could say, is sort of a mapping exercise. At least that's how I would look at it. And for me, it's really interesting because, like I said earlier, love is often, when it is discussed in studies of media or about media, it is considered a problem, leading to fabulous forms of art that try to warn us against the fact that we've become way too enamored with our devices, that we are sucked in to media, that we become like machines, you know, that we don't have affect anymore because we are mediated all the time, or that we are addicted, you know, to porn, to smartphones, to games, that we develop all kinds of disorders, or even if we are positive about love and media, then it's immediately extreme, like in the studies of fans and fandom. We finally acknowledge the love that somebody has for media or for a character in media, but then immediately jump off the cliff to the other extreme of fanatics. But sort of the everyday, mundane, sort of very grounded sort of experience of love we all have constantly in different ways. It's sometimes difficult to touch, difficult to acknowledge, and also love as a very positive notion. Love something. I mean, one of the things that I've really learned from studying love studies, as the field is called, is to consider love as an opportunity to care about more than just yourself or, let's say, one other partner, but to care about the world and to try to do something about it. And from that perspective, love actually is very transformative, very powerful, very positive. So how can we dig into that everydayness of love in media? I'm going to skip forward to the sort of taxonomy I use in my work and in the book to unpack this question of how do we love our media and what role do media play in our love. And I'll look at media on 3 different levels. First, on the level, you could say a micro level of media as practice, a tried and tested approach in media studies where we primarily look at media in terms of what people are actually doing with media, how that makes them feel, and what that practice means to them. And on a second level, on a, you could say, meso level of analysis, I look at the mediation of love. And this is a form of analysis became popularized in the 1980s and 90s, in particular, both in the West as well as in Latin America, for example, through the work of Jesus Martin Barbero, where we were looking at how media, when they play a role in the way we make sense of love and how we talk about love and everything, also transform love and our understandings of love and make us look differently at media, at each other through media, and so on and so forth. And on a third, perhaps more macro level, I'm using mediatization theory, a more recent intervention in our field, you could argue, to look at, take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Like, what if we take all the media into consideration, can we say of how our ideas about media and love are changing? What is actually happening on the broader scale, on the bigger picture? So those are the 3 analytical steps that I briefly want to explore in this talk, and hopefully more in depth in the book. And I'm very open to any kind of questions or interventions on your part, like say, hey, Mark, you should think about this or that. So let's look at what people are actually doing with love. And let's get the 800-pound gorilla in the room out of the way, pornography. Because that's also when I talk about this with my students, that's almost the first thing they go to, right? Oh, love and media. Yeah, people use the internet is about porn. You know, the famous song that was published a couple of years ago. And immediately the next step is a normative debate. This is good. No. This is bad. You know, and then we start talking about exploitation and about shame and about, you know, all kinds of horrible things, generally speaking. And this is exactly what the study of love teaches us we should prevent and should move beyond. These tired binaries of good versus bad and that sort of keep us locked in. I mean, since 2014, we don't just have a discipline of love studies. That's when an essay called Love Studies was published first. But we also have a journal of porn studies. And what that journal teaches us and what that journal advocates and celebrates is, in fact, the enormous and ever-expanding variety and complexity of sex, sexuality, sexual identifications that people all over the world experience in and through media, in part enabled through pornography. And that complexity is much more interesting and intellectually also much more interesting than the simple binary of good versus bad. So enough said about porn. What do people actually do when it comes to love and media? And of course, you could look at how people use media to find love and to keep love. And then we look at, for example, online dating. An enormous industry that used to be kind of like weird, and now it's so incredibly common. It's actually weird if you didn't meet each other on some kind of dating platform. Dating is an incredibly interesting industry because you could argue it's one of the only industries where a happy customer is very bad for business, which introduces a really interesting paradoxical sort of conundrum in our analyses of this industry. It is also an industry that on the one hand makes love easier and more complicated at the same time, right? It's easier because, you know, anything is available all the time, right? You don't have to wait until the disco open or the club, as Carolina said in the introduction. It's 24/7 party, and not just on one app, but on thousands of them. But it becomes more difficult because is the person you're matched with, is that on the basis of what is that exactly? Is that attraction, or is it the algorithm that you were matched? And ultimately, you still have to meet this stranger and fall in love. So it's fun. Sexting is another lovely way of looking at media and love as a practice. Sexting, which again often invokes normative debates, people conjuring up horrible examples of sexting going wrong, which thankfully is extremely rare. The vast majority of sexting is incredibly healthy, and this is what is so important, I think, about looking at media through the lens of love. It makes us aware that it's so much fun. Sometimes we forget that. Like, I don't know how many books of media I have to read, and there's not a single mention in an entire book about how much fun all of this is. That we love media, that a movie that we just saw, a song we just heard, just brings so much joy. And that should be the starting point for anything that we try to make sense of. And of course it is, but we sometimes don't articulate it. And I think by doing so, we get closer to, dare I say it, truth. Dating and sexting, online dating and sexting comes with regrettable side effects, like men thinking it's a really good idea to send pics of their dicks to prospective romantic partners. Luckily, we have fabulous artists that turn that into traveling shows. I don't know if you know this, look it up online, it's hilarious. The artist who made an entire installation of all the pictures of dicks that she received when she participated in online dating. It's fabulous. Other practices that we can think of that make me smile: after sex selfies. They have their own hashtag, which are absolutely beautiful. Teledildonics is this fabulous industry that got a bit of a hype in the 1990s and now have become incredibly mundane. And of course, when teledildonics, the first devices were invented that would enable people to have sex with each other through a remote connection. I mean, the first patent was filed in 1978. But the idea behind it was not that we would have sex with machines, but that machines and media would enable us to have sex with each other. It's just one more way in which romantic couples close down the space between them. And that is the primary function that media play in their life. Sexting is another example of this. Up until the introduction of sex robots. Harmony was the first model like that, introduced in 2018 by Realbotics, an American company. There's also a male version. Later on in this Summer of Love, there will be a presentation by Belinda Middleweek, very dear friend and colleague from the University of Technology in Sydney, who's done research on male users of robots and finds an incredibly complicated, very nuanced kind of community and ways of making sense of partnership and courtship in this area. Not at all gravitating towards the fears that many people have or had about sex robots, for example, as exemplified by the worldwide campaign against them. Mm-hmm. So when we look at practice, we see this wide variety of engagement between people and their media to keep love, to make love more complex, more interesting, to close down spaces. And of course, in various ways also to open them back up again, because how do we feel about all these devices in between us and our love? When we look at mediation, so we take it up a notch and we look more on the sort of emerging complex relationships between us and our media in society and how that changes over time. I want to go back to a quote in the 1992 book by Anthony Giddens on the transformation of intimacy, where he says that the rise of romantic love, in other words, where we started thinking of romantic love as something that would be possible and perhaps even necessary for people to be together. And this started happening in about the 17th and 18th century. I mean, the idea of romantic love is actually relatively new in many different ways. That idea got hold at the same time that the romantic novel came about and was introduced, suggesting a direct parallel between what we think about how we feel in terms of love and the evolution of our media. That the two cannot be separated, even though Professor Giddens is not a media scholar making a profound mediation argument here. And it is interesting that when we look at the romance novel, it is perhaps the most under-researched form of media in media studies. It hardly gets any serious attention, presentations. I mean, there are academic journals about romance fiction and so on and so forth, but they're often delegated to the side, often not even part of media studies, even though it's such an incredibly rich and arguably one of the most powerful forms of media on the planet, if anything, because it's the most popular form of media on the planet. And not just a romance novel, but what about the soap opera? And it has different names in different parts of the world, but it exists literally in every culture, in every continent, as the most popular form of media by far, which again is fascinating. But beyond the versions of love and media that are presented to us, I wanted to very briefly mention, because I know I will be running out of time soon, a project that I've been doing, not for the Media Love book, but just because I thought it would be fun. Since 2011, I've been teaching in one form or another since the late 1990s at various universities around the world, a course that led ultimately to the book Media Life, sorry. And it's sort of an introduction course for graduate and undergraduate students in media, society, and everyday life. And one of the things I ask students to do in that course, I mean, this course generally has about between 400 and 800 students, depending on where I teach it. And the students are literally coming from all over the world. And as a voluntary assignment, students don't get credit for this. It's not graded in any shape or form. I'm just asked them if they feel like doing it. I ask students to upload to this blog online, Why I Heart My Media. You can find it online. It's an open website. A story about their feelings about media, specifically why they love media. They can also say if they hate it. Love is not one emotion, it's a whole bundle of emotions. And over the years, hundreds and hundreds of students have added stories, sometimes just one line, sometimes a meme, sometimes a link to a YouTube video, sometimes a long personal story. And if you analyze these narratives, these stories about, and it's interesting, right? Most of the research in this way is done about the opposite. Why do people are addicted to media? And you get stories like that, but this is the exact opposite. From all this work, I have found at least 4 reasons why people love media so much. And if we consider these 4 reasons, it becomes actually quite understandable why, for one thing, media plays such a profound role in our lives, and secondly, why we love that so much. And of course, like all love, that relationship is not uncomplicated, nor is it unproblematic, but it's very much there, and therefore very much weird that we haven't spent more time and attention to it. First of all, in the background, you see a picture of a class that I taught at Indiana University, where I worked for 8 years. And the snippets are quotes from the blog. You don't have to read it, but the four key elements include, first of all, where people say, I love media because I can tell my story. I can express myself. I can make media. I can vent. I can tell people who I really am. I can share in more ways than I can do without media. So self-expression is a key motivation for love, obviously. The second one has to do with belonging. The notion that through media, we stay in touch with family and friends. We know where we are, where we're going. It grounds us. This notion of community and belonging and of identity are two very fundamental reasons why we love media, right? We never feel alone because of media. And then when we ask students to not use media for a day or a week and then report back on it, we are stunned that they express symptoms of addiction. Well, obviously, we just asked them to take away that what gives them a sense of belonging and community and identity. Obviously, that feels horrible. I don't think that's evidence of addiction. It's just evidence of being a normal human being, that those things are important to you. And finally, this is a long story that you shouldn't read, really. I'll go back to this one, is that a lot of students in my classes, when they write on this blog, talk about how they sometimes are overwhelmed with really strong feelings of love, or of hate, of anger, of joy, of intense feelings that you don't feel comfortable, or you feel unsafe expressing face to face, or in wherever you're staying or living or working or going to school. And then media allows you to do this. So media is actually something that empowers and enables having and expressing strong feelings rather than thwarting them or suppressing them. So these are fundamental reasons why it is easy to understand why we love media so much, and media plays such a profound role in love. I'm going to conclude now with an incredibly far-fetched argument, and that's why I'm going to rush through it in 2 minutes. I'm sorry, Caroline, I hope you forgive me for taking that time, because it's a macro argument. The picture you're seeing is actually of a tunnel of love, which is in the Vondelpark in downtown Amsterdam, the city where I also live. So in mediatization theory, we look at the macro perspective. Like, I mean, how is society and its institutions as a whole affected by this sort of the shift that we're identifying, in this case, the shift of this trend of us loving our media and media playing a role in our love lives. And I want to use this concept to speak more, I would say, literally about media love, as in the love that we have for our media as devices, as materiality, the materiality of media, the stuff of our media. Because something I think really interesting has been happening that we can see, that is documented in our media texts. Consider, for example, our love for and with media in film. Some of you may know the film Barbarella from 1968, where Jane Fonda is put into a device in an excessive machine intended to kill her, but she proceeds to have sex with the device and then, of course, surviving, to the big frustration of her torturer. But still, the device here is something intending to kill us. About 10 years later, Woody Allen made the movie Sleeper, about a society where people have sex in devices called orgasmatrons. They look like elevator shafts that you go into, spend about 5 seconds and come out, and they take away all the messiness of sex. It still requires 2 people in that space, and they still get orgasms, but part of it is outsourced to a device. It's a cold, machine-like future that Woody tells us about in this film, and he advocates throughout the film, the messiness of real human relationships. Fast forward about 20 years, we get into the 1990s. there's a movie called Demolition Man with Sandra Bullock and Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes, in which just people in that society don't have sex with each other anymore. They have sex with electronic devices that you put into your head because they don't want, as Sandra Bullock says in the movie, fluid transfer. Which is something Sylvester Stallone, who's a man from the past, defrosted in the future, just simply doesn't get. But again, this sort of like sex, but perfectly okay to have sex through a device. And now we're coming into our time, and we see Oscar-winning movies like Her, where somebody falls in love with a computer operating system and has sex with it in the film, if you remember. And this time the machine is not out to kill us. It actually is an incredibly warm, caring, I mean, you can't help, I mean, partly because of the fabulous performance of Scarlett Johansson as the computer, and Joaquin Phoenix, of course, as the main actor, but still, it's an incredibly warm-blooded film about somebody having sex with a computer. A year later, we had Ex Machina, where we felt really warm and caring about a beautiful young woman who was a robot, but enslaved behind closed doors. And because somebody fell in love with her, he set her free. So that's an interesting evolution of us having sex and falling in love with machines, from machines that are out to kill us to machines that we've fallen in love with and want to set free. You see the same trend in literature, starting from the 17th century with Hoffman's amazing story, The Sandman, about a man falling in love with an automaton and not wanting to hear the advice of his friends, saying, dude, your wife is a robot. And okay, they didn't say dude in the 17th century, but you'll forgive me. And then in the end, when he actually realizes she is an automaton, he commits suicide because it's just too scary to comprehend. And then we go to the 70s and we have this beautiful short story, Super Toys Last All Summer Long, which later on got acquired by Stanley Kubrick and then taken up by Steven Spielberg to turn into the movie AI, about when the society can't have kids, they replace children with artificial children who then get dumped when they get permission to actually conceive a real child. In the novel, this is a harrowing story. In the movie, in the end, we are made to feel sorry for the robot that gets discarded at the end in favor of a real human being, which is an interesting emotional shift. Michel Houellebecq, in The Possibility of an Island, talks about, you know, that the only true joy in society is having sex, but that's a kind of an empty experience. So he clones himself and finds peace and joy in sort of the emptiness of life as a clone. And then in this year's book by Kazuo Ishiguro, a Nobel Prize winning author, Clara and the Sun, it's about children that are being kept companion by artificial friends, written from the perspective of the artificial friend. So I see again this development of machines and technologies through which we experience love as scary, full of horror, and even out to kill us, to a contemporary articulation of love and sex through machines that is actually warm, empathic, from the perspective of the device itself. I could go on and on by looking at television. The Cylons in the 1970s were cold, heartless, cybernetic organism intending to kill us. Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator, the Borg in Star Trek. But what were the recent iteration of Battlestar Galactica in 2004? Cylon was a gorgeous, warm-blooded woman that had relationships. 7 of 9 was a Borg that fell in love and had and people fell in love with her. So again, we see that same kind of interesting development where our intimacy with devices and machines and media has crossed a certain threshold. And I think now, and this is my last point for today, I'm sorry for running over time. Why all of this excites me so much, makes me happy. Beyond that, it's such a fertile ground for research and for thinking through all these things, is that the study of love and the study of media today share a really interesting property. I'm quoting Ania Jonasdottir, who introduced the field of love studies. And she says, she argues that love is clearly significant as a transformative power sui generis in social love. In other words, through love, we can make a world, perhaps even a better world. Now, what do we know about media and media studies? We know that when people use media, this can have the effect of creating new social worlds, which we call the worlding effects of media practices. This is a quote from John Postel from a debate on media anthropology earlier this year. And this is the true, I think, power of looking at media and love when we make sense of the world today, is that they both carry the promise of transformation, of giving us agency to make a world, rather than to consume one or to just adapt to one or to accept that this is the one that we're living in. No, 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 no. Through media and love, we can create a world. I mean, we consistently do. The simple act of using media is world making. The simple act of loving is world making. So that opens up the specter of the question. So, okay, great. So now we have this power. What are we going to do with it? And I think this Summer of Love will give us a lot of answers. And thanks again, Carolina, for allowing me to ramble on a bit about all of this.
Thank you. What are we going to do? Well, there are so many things that I'd like to say, but of course, we are already running out of time. And I'm the worst, you know, I'm the stereotypical Italian, never punctual. So I would invite Ania to talk about her research. I think there are many points of contact and overlapping points, especially between, okay, how we can love media devices, the materiality of love, the libidinal investment, the affect. I mean, different people have use different terms. And I would really love to have at least 30 minutes, and perhaps we can run a bit out of time. We can finish a bit after 5:30, in which there will be this very revolutionary move of making all attendees panelists, if I manage, and then we can have sort of a wider debate. Absolutely. So, Ania, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mark. And again, Carolina, thank you for having us. It's a great honor and pleasure presenting here today. I will start with a little bit of self-promotion, because, you know, this book I've just submitted to Cambridge is not the only book it's not the only recent thing I've done on love. There is another book actually in press, like coming out very, very soon, Data, Dating, Love, Technology, Desire. And I mentioned them. It's an edited collection. It is a very experimental book, because it's an experiment on like cultural criticism and new media art. It was inspired by exhibition Data Dating, curated by Valentina Perry, first in Paris, then in London, then in Tel Aviv. And I mentioned this to say that, you know, I'm happy to see how both the books answers mark dilemmas and questions, and can contribute to the conundrum you were talking about with regard to love and media. And just very briefly to address what you've just said about this addiction thing. You say that we are addicted to the media. In love studies, we say that we are addicted to the media transmit. Love is very addictive, like from the biological point of view, from the brain chemistry point of view. We are just, on the one hand, very much addicted to relationships, to company, but also we shun company. But this is something I'm going to talk about, to address in a second. I also agree that there is a problem of qualitative approaches like better good, but also like qualitative in the sense like bipolar. We tend to operate in terms of like those kind of, you know, dichotomies, like artificial, natural, organic, inorganic. This approach is completely obsolete, like tangible, intangible, material, non-material. We no longer do this. Thank you so much for mentioning porn studies, Clarissa Smith, with whom I worked in Sunderland. She's a brilliant scholar and the scholar behind this journal. Her book, One for the Girl, is one of the most important studies of the hermeneutics of porn for women. So this is what I wanted to kind of to highlight so that we do not miss it. We talk about algorithms. In my book, I claim, both the books, I claim that, and all the books perhaps, I claim that we've been forever algorithmic. It's something which I'm going to talk about in a moment, because my book, the recent one, Love in Contemporary Technoculture, which is a follow-up of my Fulbright project, Feelings Without Organs. It revolves around 5 main points that I believe that define a mediatized love, love with technologies. We understand media a little bit differently. My understanding of the media is the communication devices. So I just kind of, want to make it very, very clear. Also, the way I defined love is, and I understand love, is a formation of a we. We being kind of a romantic thing, being an erotic thing, being just a company. Because, the mediatized love we talk about relates to relationships of any sort and conveys the idea of company. And the first point, I think, that is very characteristic for media love, love with media, and technologized love is a decrease in interest that humans have in one another that we have been observing for quite a while. And it means that we seem less inclined to engage with fellow humans, but also we seem to find more pleasure in technological artifacts for the reasons I'm going to explain. One of them being that because they emulate human features that help us redefine the understanding of subjecthood. So the interesting shift we've been observing is the change of the object of love. You said something about mediated love, saying that, of course, love is being mediated, but it's still two people, people being engaged in a relationship. We can no longer make this distinction. Media take very active part due to their templates, due to many other things, take very, very active role in this kind of, love dynamic. But this is something I'm going to touch upon in a second. But this shift in the object of love from a human being to technological subject is something Byung-Chun Hall, who in his Agony of Eros links with the libidinal atrophy, which is a progressing depression of depression that results from obscuring the trajectories in a libidinal exchange, which no longer is from self to another, but is a one scene, something that Badiou calls a one scene. Over a decade ago, Sherry Tokul coined a very interesting term to speak of a standard of togetherness today, which is alone together. I would flip it. I think that the social standard of togetherness is together alone, which means that, of course, we want companionship, we want coupledom, but we want to do it like single-handedly. We want them to be one scene. I know that you will be going to talk about Love and Sex with Robots. Catherine Delvin will be also your guest. The appeal and attractiveness, research proves, of robots as potential companions and sex partners is related to non-negotiability. What it means that technological subjects being programmed in a very specific way, they never negotiate the code of love that we want to consume. And this brings me to the second point of my book, which my book revolves around. And it's on a very pessimistic note, that what we are perhaps most interested in or about love is the consumption of the code. And it's been forever like that since the medieval, early modern period, since the period of game tags or games of love or affection games, that were simply like games dramatizing the experience of love for the purpose of courtly entertainment. You talked about love as entertainment, and of course, moral well-being. The Bible was teaching everything but the conduct for intimacy. And this is where those game texts stepped in. They provided like phraseology, the entire semiotics for the love conduct, which later became known as romantic love. Yes, so this is what we know as romantic love. Which is not a feeling, Luhmann says, which is like a code of communication. Everybody recognizes, we recognize those gestures that we just kind of send that stimulate or deny feelings with all the consequences. And the interesting thing about technology is that it unravels that situation. It unveils that that we want to consume love. You mentioned this movie, Her. What happens in Her is the operational system talking like using phrases, idioms we recognize as being like the erotic lingo, the intimate parlor. And this is, the source of titillation. There is a scene I used to write about a lot, the scene of kissing, like the kind of a foreplay, which is like never materialized, but, happens discursively. And this is what we want to do. We want to consume the discourse of love without presence. So we shun company actually, but what we want the code. We want to consume the code. One of my favorite examples is Gatebox. It's a device with a hologram inside. You can operate from your mobile phone, and the entire exchange, platonic and perfectly romantic and very, very intimately erotically stimulating, happens via discourse, via the exchange of the expressions we identify with care, with love. So I'm waiting for you. Please just be home. I miss you. Blah blah blah. So that was the second thing. Just like love being a code forever. And of course, like those devices play a great role in this. And it's not that objectophilia or algamatophilia, which is attraction to statues, dolls, and puppets, is a new occurrence. Of course, it's ancient, it's not new. But the game changer is anthropomorphic modeling and, of course, digital animation. They are like a milestone in this entire idea, because they make us believe that the objects technological objects or entities we are interacting through, by means of or with, are like sensitive objects or the actual feeling subjects. In 2017, Tony Miller and myself, we coined the term sensitive media to render this emotional sensibility and capability of devices seen in how they can convey, reflect, and respond to human needs, but also in how they contribute to contemporary emotional cultures and dynamics. And also, this kind of how, like, our telephone can just greet us with an emoticon, right? Or how Siri can respond very effectively, or those sex robots. I've tested one. It was quite an adventure, because it can really dupe you into thinking, like the Tamagotchi thing. It can dupe you into thinking that it's kind of, very emotional and responds to you emotionally. It changes the idea of effective presence, which brings me to the fourth point of my book, which is the emergence of negative proxemics. Mediated closeness changes the idea of space. And again, we do not mind the lack of presence. We want symbolic interactionism. I'm quoting like criticism now, which is based on the exchange of meaning we develop. Like, for instance, we both understand the same code of love and we exchange it. And this is what the kind of relationship is founded on. It's of course related to the idea of haptic media. something you, Mark, also has brought up and talked about, and the change of the senses. Now we rely on tactility. Tactile media became like at the forefront all of a sudden of communication, and therefore on intimacy. Teledildonics, hug shirts, any other devices, and many add-ons like Kissinger. You can just kiss somebody using your mobile phone. Of course, and other wearables, they are still very, very primitive, but the idea is there. In last year, in March last year, which was very symbolic, the first touchable hologram was released at the lab in Hong Kong. There is another in Bristol using like sound waves to kind of produce the impression of presence, like to emulate other person's presence. So this is another thing. At the same time, research in haptic media say we cannot talk about the crisis of touch. We can also talk about like reinscribing tactility onto the new media. And the last thing I just kind of, I think that characterizes love with technologies or media love is what I term fast love, the ever accelerating dynamic in executing togetherness. Fast love is something I coined to kind of, to contribute to the criticism of immediacy culture, like fast food, fast travel, fast work. And to render the major shift that has affected our romantic and other encounters, which is related to a shift with a shift from analog, temporal, and calculable towards digital, ultra rapid, and computational. And this shift is very, very fluid, and it's not something like that one shows up and other reality disappears. No, they clash and they generate the so-called time collapse. And the very good example of time collapse and the time friction when it comes to the kind of that comes out of that shift is an example I love to use, and I use in my book. Imagine that lover A mails lover B a long distance parcel, be it like a birthday gift or Valentine's present. And the parcel travels from, let's say, Bozeman, Montana in the USA to Katowice, Poland. It can take like 2 months for the parcel to arrive. In the meantime, the couple splits up, breaks up using text message or first FaceTime call. And this parcel, when it arrives, marks this time collapse I'm talking about, and marks this shift I'm talking about, yes, which is very, very characteristic of this kind of, problems and distractions, inconveniences or novelties coming with mediated love. And it's funny that love is designed for media and has been always mediated. It's just the character of the media related to time, space, and other factors, efficiency as well, that has changed. But this is what I want to highlight, because that love is just like embedded in media, has always been the romantic love as we understand it, and the care as we understand it has been always just like, has been designed for media and cannot be detached from the media. And this is what I always say to step into kind of the debates that talk about like talk about media love from the position of techno-skepticism. Also, techno-enthusiasm is something very, very interesting, and we should be like very careful about. Something that caught my attention that Mark mentioned about students feeling that they can like express their identity using the media. It's interesting because, in love studies, we talk about self-presentation in terms of like a complete loss of the selves. to media templates, which is like, of course, identity and individuality, but coming within a very specific format that is also very constraining and very, very limited. Yes, so this is what I wanted to say. I hope that I just kind of, you know, haven't taken up too much of your time. Thank you so much again for the invite. I will be happy to answer more questions if there are any. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And again, I really have to sort of how to say hold on to myself to not ask you so many questions, and also tell you all the kind of overlappings, the observations that I've made when I studied dating apps. I really observed how the people kind of really establish this romantic or erotic connection with app themselves, that in this mechanism of seduction. So what I'd like to do now is to really sort of try to bring everybody on screen. So if you don't want to appear on screen, then of course you can turn your cam off, but kind of turn this webinar into a meeting, because I'd love, I mean, it's not super easy, but I really love to create a sense of expanded dialogue and debate. In the meantime that I do this manually, I will just read a very pertinent question by Sergio Aguilar. Actually, Sergio, perhaps I can just start by inviting you so that you can, sorry, let me see if I can do it. Not entirely sure I can do it what I thought I could 1 second ago. Why? Well, anyway, let me read this. Okay, Sergio, you're here. Perfect. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, morning, whichever time zone you are. Thank you for your both presentations. And yeah, well, now that I have the microphone, now I can expand my question. But my question was, which is the nature of the concept of love that you used? You mentioned many authors, different academic disciplines, from feminism to neurosciences. The absent one was psychoanalysis, which is, as you know, the discipline that has perhaps much more than any other during the past century written about love. But whichever the discipline or the field of knowledge, all of them have very different conceptions of love. And it seemed to me that during both presentations, you took as granted what we understand as love. But as we know from those very fields of knowledge and our own personal experience, we know that we can love something that we hate. We love hating something. And here comes psychoanalysis, of course. There is something lost in translation. For example, in English, you can say, I like you and I love you, and those are different. In Spanish, you have other ways to say different types of affects. I guess that in French, you have also different ways to say affects. You can love something and you don't know why you love it. You hate something and you don't know why you hate it. So the question is, which is the main theoretical conception that you have on love, and how do you think that your approach to the concept of love influences your research? That's the question. Because I would guess that you do not take this concept as something univocal, obvious, or granted. So that's what I ask that. How do you think that your theoretical conception of love influences your own research? Thank you.
So you see, thank you very much, Sergio. You see that we go everywhere in the most complicated thing, but then the question about what is love keeps hunting us somehow. I don't know, please go ahead.
I will speak for myself, and of course, like I'm being like a semiotician by training. I stem from cultural semiotics, and this is where my interest in love comes from. And of course, communication studies like Luhmann. Critical thinking, which is also very much embedded in Barthes, who was also a semiotician. That is why I definitely draw a lot on Barthes. But like I said in my like opening statement, my definition of love as a formation of a we comes from it's also like, you know, theoretically embedded. It's a definition coined by Nozick in 1989 to not to kind of limit my my debate, my way of thinking, to romantic love, which is like usually this kind of love we associate with the media. And of course, you know, there are like methodologies in very media studies. I stick to writing a book. We need to be very disciplined. We cannot just kind of, you know, jump from one place to another. So this is where my like provenance is. I also wanted to say, to address like something which just like I find very interesting about what she said, like that we like something which we hate, or we hate something that we love, and also that different languages like express love differently. Like I said, semiotics is very specific about like being embedded in the code people understand. Of course, you know, like transcultural love, translinguistic love generates new codes of loving, but this is something I don't do. But, you know, there is also a belief that there is a kind of a theory in cultural studies saying that we operate by certain cultural pop cosmopolitanism, and definitely when it comes to love, it definitely is a thing. But what you said about loving things we hate, I am also a trained hypnotist. Like I have a license, and I've been also approaching love lately from the perspective of not psychoanalysis, maybe, because it's not I'm not trained and I'm not very fluent in psychoanalysis, but definitely from practical hypnosis. And behavioral studies definitely reveal different ideas about love, which are not media related, which function irrelatively of the media, which brings us to an interesting point, that media technologies are only the media for something I don't think is definable. Love is not definable, even if we've tried to do it for centuries.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ania. Mark, do you want to tell us what is love for you? Or
yeah, of course. Yeah, no. I know what love is. I mean,
of course. I mean, who doesn't?
That's easy. Let's talk about what media are. No, look, if you want to be incredibly simplistic, and because I'm at the start of my book writing, other than Ania, who is at the end of her book writing, and I can't wait for the book to come out. You want to be as open-minded and open-hearted as possible. And in the, you know, I've told you the story about all the books in the hallway of my apartment. So, you know, and I won't pretend that I've read all of them, but I've read some of them, and I've read a lot of articles and talked to a lot of people. And you can argue that there's generally two camps in this field, right? One camp that opts for some kind of definition, like, and very often some quote from Plato's Republic is invoked, right? A discussion at a dinner table where a group of Greek men, there's always men, talk to each other about different kinds of love, you know, love as eros and love as philia, and love as like different kinds of love.
Hey, I need to step in. Diatoma in Plato, she was a female. So she was a female. So like
I stand corrected.
Love it comes from a woman speaking.
Lovely.
So, love as a luck. Diatoma,
thank you.
Poor woman.
so and then from that moment on, there's some kind of attempt to classify, to move love into the realm of discourse, or the realm of emotion, or the realm of, you know, biology, and that's all that's lovely. And then there's the second sort of, roughly speaking, school of thought, and that's the school of thought that that is mainly responsible for this field of love studies that I referenced earlier, often coming from feminist studies and feminist media studies, who are a bit reluctant to go the definitional route, often associating these kind of definitions with a very sort of male-centered way of looking at things, putting things in boxes and making things nice and neat and so on, and sort of saying, well, you know, we invite any and all kind of reflections on love in any shape or form. I mean, this is again a simplistic rendition of the discussion, which is incredibly complicated. And I totally second Ania's comment that, you know, the debate on the definition of love is essentially open-ended. Thank God it is. But I would argue that what for me the most useful notion is that love is a condition. It's not a feeling, it's a condition that includes a whole bunch of feelings, including obviously hate, but also lust and desire and passion and, you know, jealousy, to name but a few. So it's a condition, and as a condition it offers a perspective on things. Like, I mean, we all know this from ourselves and from our friends. You see things differently when you love something or someone. Like, it's like, you know, rose-colored glasses, or whatever the cliche expression is. So that's a beautiful handle that we have on what love is. And because it's a condition, it is shaped by what we use to express this condition of. And that's, of course, and that's also what Ania, I think, talks about so powerfully, right? I mean, that when we talk about love, we don't talk about something intrinsic or authentic, or, you know, that is out there that we sort of tap into and then we have this deep feeling. No. It's a complete construct, to a large extent produced by technologies and media and text and images and sounds and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, every time we fall in love, every time we love something, we also produce a version of that love that isn't necessarily the same or that as all those other versions. So that's where I'm at. Love is a condition that offers a perspective on things, and through that perspective, I think I find a lot of inspiring ways of looking at that what I study, media, and that what people who care about love write about from all these different fields. And maybe I can tag on and offer one more comment for the next question, and that Ania can maybe also respond to, which was asked by my dear friend and University of Amsterdam colleague Misha Kafka in the chat that I just saw. Is like, how do you prevent this whole discussion about love to slip into sex and to you know, or is that fine, or is that a problem, or how do you keep them separate? Or and as you notice in my talk, I very quickly jumped on the sex bandwagon, right? I mean, and I'll admit, partly maybe because that's titillating and it's sort of like, ooh, interesting, partly because that's when we talk about love, that's often like an immediate reference, and immediately it's like a discussion that comes up. So I think it's part of the condition of love. I mean, and of course you can separate them. I mean, like I said, the ancient Greeks, what did they call it? This sort of sexless love, agape, but which is an incredibly powerful force. For example, why should we do anything about climate change? Because we love our planet, right? Which has nothing to do with sex. But it also, it deserves, it warrants clear articulation and discussion. So in my work, it's part of the equation, and I'll be honest, I've yet to find a nuanced enough way to talk about it. But I can't ignore the fact that sex forms an important part of the condition of love. So if you talk about love, you have to talk about sex in one way or another. That would be my perspective. Ania, please.
But I just wanted to kind of add something very, very important. I believe that that might just kind of, you know, explain what you were talking about and why this immediate association with sex when we talk about media love just kind of, you know, pops up. It's because like media devices, especially platforms, online dating, like dildos and like are usually designed for a hookup. And also they are designed, and this is more important, for the first stage of love, referred to as psychologically and psychoanalytically as limerence. So this is, you know, this is the stage of like when the chemistry changes. And it's interesting that the media, we don't have platforms to, we have platforms for like for just kind of, you know, chat somebody up and just then to take the relationship like to a real life environment. We do not have platforms for the next post-limerence stage, which is differentiation. This is very, very interesting. So again, the media we are dealing with, it's kind of the media that design our understanding of love, which limit love to this kind of first stage of love, limerence. The media are designed specifically for like facilitating limerence, taking us through limerence. Somebody says in the age of liquid love, this is debatable. And somebody asked me about Badiou. Yes, I understand the concept of liquid love, but it's very, very tricky because I'm very much against thinking that with new technologies, even if they are just kind of like not perfect, very, very much imperfect and selective in supporting like stages of love and understanding of love, excluding care to a large extent, for instance, I do not think that they liquefy love, and not at all. They just kind of reinscribe it, and this is what I'm very specific about. But yes, this association with sex comes to the fore because of the very media design and because of, you know, what sells. Of course, sex sells, limerence sells, because feeling good sells, positive psychology sells. That is why the media address and help us manage those kind of, you know, experiences and practices that tap into those fragments and parts of love. But also, not to undermine technologies, there is a huge business when it comes to care robots, specifically robots used in hospitals. And what's very, very interesting, despite very hard anthropomorphization, naturalization of those robots to behave like humans, both children and pensioners for whom those technologies are designed, they enjoy the company of robots, not because of their human-like features, but because of the roboticness in robots. And that is why I'm a sort of an advocate for like giving up the naturalization of robots and talking about, if we need to talk about like any kind of artificial personality, let's talk about robothood, because this is what they enjoy. And this is what I'm also talking about when I talk about sensitive media. There is this like affective affordance that technological objects bring into play. That of course just completely like shocks our understanding of love, especially that we want to glamorize it and romanticize it.
I think that this in part also sort of connects the question that Suketa, sorry for the pronunciation of your name, typed in. So the stickiness of media, everything is liquid, perhaps everything melts into air if you want to go with Marx, but somehow there is the stickiness of the app, and I think that your concept of sensitive media and the ways also in which Mark kind of partially also celebrates this attachment that we have sometimes relates to it. But there is Jeff that has Jeff Baker. Please, Jeff, come in.
Yeah, greetings from Montana, from the United States. It's fantastic presentation. First of all, Carolina, thanks for hosting. And Ania and Mark, you guys make a great team. You should go on a world tour presenting on this topic because it's fantastic. And Mark, by the way, if I were a little younger, I would have had you as a professor when I was at Indiana University, Bloomington. I graduated with a degree in telecommunications. Saw that on your bio.
Go Hoosiers.
Go Hoosiers, indeed, exactly. So my question is, you've provided, both of you, some compelling and titillating examples of how both love in the media as well as love and technology, and automatons and sex robots and that kind of thing, all of which to me are obviously very alluring. But at what point, and perhaps this is a question that can't be answered by anyone other than a relationship therapist, but at what point does this quote unquote facsimile of a true connection potentially become an impediment to a real relationship, quote unquote, that you have with a person? Like, are these facsimiles, quote unquote, the property exclusively of people not in a relationship? And if not, then how can that threesome be balanced?
Mark, do you want to?
You want me to start?
Yes.
Ania,
Do you want to
please?
tell us about this threesome?
Yeah, I love to talk about threesomes. Musician, instrument, and audience, right? That's a threesome. That's the only threesome I'm familiar with. In one of the very few texts that I found in media studies where love is sort of full front and central as a concept to be debated is a book from 1999 by John Durham Peters called Speaking into the Air. It's a sort of an alternative history of the idea of communication. And in this book, he makes a very provocative point. He said, look, all we do in the field of media communication, I'm paraphrasing John's work, is incredibly eloquent and beautiful, so please read it. But I'm paraphrasing. I hope he will allow me. He speaks Dutch, by the way. It's very cool. He says, like, all our worries involving media and communication are about love. Why? Because we want media and communication to solve the problem of love, which is that we are constantly looking for perfect communication, for perfect, which is love, right? Like when you can say something to somebody else and they just get it, right? You don't have to do anything else. You are together with somebody and you come together and you're a unit, whether that's a romantic unit or a collegial unit or community unit, doesn't matter. So every question that we ask of media and communication is a question like, please help us figure this out, solve this problem. Because what we experience in the real world, it is that no communication is perfect. We always fuck up, right? I mean, it's like we just can't get it. I mean, why is fake news the #1 funded area of research right now? Because we were supposed to solve that problem 50 years ago with the professionalization of journalism, and by golly, we haven't. And of course, we never will. There is no relationship more authentic without media than with media. That is an understandable like quest, which will never materialize. So it's this. So my answer to your point is, I think, is to follow John Durham. It says like, don't love the perfect, like the real relationship that isn't mediated or that isn't with an automaton, but love the imperfection in all relationships, and whether they are mediated or not, and use whatever you have at your disposal to together, because that's what love enables, right? To stop thinking about yourself, but to think about exactly what Anna says so beautifully about a we, to form a we, which is with one person or with a community or with the world or the cosmos, whatever. And so that's where I would be. That's where I will look for real love to talk about in your terms. It's a really inspiring question. Thanks, Jeff.
Anna.
If I may, I just kind of, I will answer this with an idea of materiality of love, which I think, defines love for us, or we defined love by means of how we perceive materiality. Love has been and authenticity, authentic love, like real love experience, has been forever associated with presence, with embodiment, or missing the embodiment. Waiting has been like a forever, a certain status of love. But of course, a couple getting together is something that speaks of the authenticity of a relationship. And this is what people who are against like love with media talk about very often. What the media has done have done for us is that they changed this idea of the materiality of love. So love as an experience and as a practice does not need to require a physical presence. So this is like a very, very interesting point, and it does not need to speak about the authenticity of a relationship. The problem is something I've mentioned before, that the media are perfect with the device are perfect with handling limerence, but not with handling differentiation, like what comes next. They are not perfect with handling the fact that the relation evolves, changes. So this is problematic. But when it comes to the question of materiality and authenticity, because this is something I believe you were talking about, this has changed. And of course, we are three, like people in mediated relationships are always, this is always a threesome, but it's been forever a threesome, because if there is not a medium in between the people, like a computer, there is always a code. There is always a code that is the third party in the relationship. That is why, can we talk? The question is, can we at all talk about authentic relationships? I don't think so. We talk about like the practice versus experience. So the experience is important. For some people, that just that works. Like it's a shocking new template. Of course, it's like very much against the status quo and social organization, the core of which is still marriage. Long-term relationship, long distance relationships, the relationship with technological entities, even if they entail marriage very often, because people like get married to robots or Digians. This is a common practice in Japan, but still it's against the economy of marriage, that marriage like brings into societies, and the kind of organization introduces chaos that societies are not yet prepared for. So this is what I wanted to say. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I just it's almost 7:30, I'll say 5:05, 17:30. But if there is some other questions, I think we can go on for a few minutes. I think I just like to comment on a couple of things that emerged. I think that the question of materiality and embodiment and the role of body when it comes to love and sex, and what body, whose body, what kind of body? Is it a cyborg body? Is it an imagined body? Is it only your body? Is it a reflection of your body? Is one of the most interesting aspects. And I'm now interviewing people about their use of dating apps, especially during lockdown. And it is at the very beginning of this qualitative research, so I don't have fully fledged things. But one interesting practice that it seems to point at a certain digital culture of love, or digital romantic culture, or erotic culture, is this idea of doing sexting, or actually cyber sex or virtual sex, disembodied sex, as kind of hooking up on dating apps and then having this disembodied one-off that is not supposed to lead to an actual encounter, because it would be quite embarrassing to have actual sex with someone you already had sex without a body. And then it seems like you put the body in the middle and things become kind of more complicated. And certainly, this is something not necessarily super new, but I think it is interesting to see how the relationship between love and pleasure and eros and the body and the role of the body, it is, I think, remediated, to say the least, and to some extent transformed. And we can see it in micro practices, such as what do I do tonight? I can have a disembodied one-off kind of thing. And you mentioned this idea of authentic relationship, and it seems that you are saying, okay, there is always a code, there is always a third. Psychoanalytically, this is always the case. You cannot just love one another without something in the middle. It would be a dreadful symbiosis rather than love. So there's always this love is always this triangulation of desire. But it seems when you were speaking that saying, okay, there is not authentic relationship because there is a code. Are you saying that, okay, because there is a code, there is not authentic relationship? Perhaps I'm not sure that the authenticity is what the code makes impossible. I mean, a coded relationship can be authentic in this respect. So I wonder, I'm asking you, what do you mean by authentic? What do we mean by authentic?
Like I said, this is the perception, like this is one of the codes, like that the presence, physical presence, being physically present, like entails, or is it just like a condition for a relationship to be authentic? And it's kind of, again, it's something produced by the cultural code. So no, this is not my opinion. I don't think it. I think, that whatever goes, and in terms of like, being always aware of the templates for relationships that just kind of corrupt us. This is what I'm talking about. But, you've made an interesting point about, with the question, what body is the body in a relationship, even if it's like a purely platonic, like friendship, or a relationship for company, for care, but also for titillation, for erotic exchange. So it's funny how we can see that love is always about, and relationships are always about, presence over the body. So it's funny, like we simply need this point of reference. It's funny because we could be doing this on our own. We could be telling us, like imagining like the significant other, and it's not working. We need somebody, even if only virtually, to be this point of reference.
Even if it is imagined. I think this is also how the gamification of dating apps work, because okay, there's nobody there, but I can fantasize. Yes. I can fantasize that there is another body there.
Fantasy, just it's kind of, maybe it's a psychological thing, and definitely, from the point of view of a hypnotist, I would say that this is a kind of our unconscious works. That the fact that I know that it's a real person, even if he or she is not present, even if they are absent, it kind of makes them a kind of valuable point of reference for me. This is that is why, like, what I'm experiencing seems like real. And this is what Benzev was writing when he was like talking about in his, like, it was the first like big book, psychological book about online love and emotions. He was talking like those acts, even if imaginary, are very, very real. Why? Because they have impact on our real life performance, like tangibly. Also, when we take up the idea of a performative, introduced like, back in the 1950s by J.L. Austin, who said who said that we just live by a performative. Like we say, okay, so we are a couple now. Okay, I love you, and it changes, like this utterance changes our reality completely. Yes, we change plans, we change jobs, we change locations. So when we look at this, look at love from this perspective as a performative, and it is a performative. Marriage is a performative, right? I do.
Yeah,
it's a performative. So it's kind of interesting, and again brings us back to my point that we cannot talk about tangible or intangible. It's like, it's been always like imaginary. It's a fabulation. And again, the idea of fabulation takes us back to the early modern period. It's been like designed to be a fabulation, the practice of love, because there is a difference, because what love is, and it is kind of this thing we call love, and the practice of love. These are different things. And because like the question that you feel that something is authentic and something is real is beyond words. And this is intended to be beyond words, because there is like post-material studies talk about like reality being beyond words, beyond. Also, when we talk about bodies, we experience love by means of our human shell, which is very limited. Fly would experience the same emotion differently because of it has different body, it's a different vision. The same works for robot. It has a different physical quality, material one. And that is why operational one. It's just because of like we've subjugated thinking about emotions to the idea of human cogito, that it sucks. Yes, and this is, you know, the thing we operate within. In a paper about kissing, which is very, very playful, I'm asking a question when like Samantha, this operational system from her, is kissing the guy. They are just recreating the very human kind of foreplay. But my question was, what would it be like to kiss her way, their way, robot way? What are the new standards of love? For instance, animals break into the landscape. We will never know what it is like to love like a bat, to kind of, you know, appropriate the famous question asked by Nigel about life, kind of cognitive abilities of animals. But this is what my question is. Sentience is we talk about sentience only from the perspective of our human shell, and it's only one phenomenology, and therefore it's only one hermeneutics.
Yeah,
I know it sounds
we
super.
are a bit stuck with it. I mean, I don't know if we'll ever sort of understand how flies love, but
you will not. I presume.
You will not, indeed. Yeah. But and I have just a question or a comment for Mark that perhaps also relate to it. Seems to me that to wrap up, we have this relationship, affective, romantic, libidinal, with technology, with another, or something that also in a process of othering of ourselves as desiring people, as people we love, as object of love. Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting because you have also a different perspective, but there is this fundamental, I think, starting point that is, okay, media as object of love, mm-hmm. as love object in and of themselves. And then what kind of implications we can draw. And Mark pointed at the fact that, okay, we love media, perhaps we also hate them, it is part of love. There is a very complex, there are a lot of things going on. There is this poetic, this generation of emotion. And I wonder then, do we need an ethic of, an ethics to sort of think through our relationship with media, if we take seriously the question of media or technology as a partner, and we don't completely objectify that partner in the relationship, is there the space for the question of ethics to emerge? And then I just want to read out to the question of Sergio. Sergio says, we might never understand how flies love, which is another thing that we can sort of portare a casa in Italian, bring it home from today. But the point to be discussed is that we are the ones asking those questions, not the flies. Well, perhaps, yes, we don't know what question flies ask. And I see that there is a question from, from two people. Come in, Alberto, and then Fahad, please ask your questions, and mine can wait, really.
Hello everyone. Thank you for this great talk. Sorry about my hair. Also, probably will keep it out of the framing. So I was really fascinated also by Anna's reference to semiotics, which is something that I still have a relationship with, having relationship with things and other things. So I was interested in, I mean, one also line of investigation that also with Carolina we've been doing recently is about this question of translation that I find interesting because there are actual people who translate what they perceive as being romantic cultures or sexual cultures into artifacts. So there is maybe also a question to be asked of what is this process? How does it take place? What does it imply for us? We are interacting with people who have programmed things based on their perception on how certain cultures and certain things work. So, of course, there is a fundamental human intervention and reading of what we do, what we want. And there is a rendition of this in an artifact and an algorithm or affordances, as to use a typical media term. So that is my question would be, if you see these.
And I want to call, if you want, Fahad Mahmoud to ask your question. Otherwise, I can read it for you. But if you want to turn your camera and mic on and intervene, we'll be pleased. Okay, I'll read it. So in the traditional and closed societies like India or Pakistan, the presence of new media has opened possibilities of love, intimacy, and opportunities that were not available earlier. And now for one to be in live the absence or in love, the absence of new media, for one to be in love, I think the absence of new media is unimaginable. And I think it's a question for Mark, but I would invite Mark and then Anna to respond to these insights from Alberto and Fahad. Mark.
Well, I mean, the last couple of questions and comments were great, but also very, very broad. So I just want to articulate that I feel this session really reminds me of how much amazing and fun and important things are opened up when we start talking about them in terms of love, right? I mean, I've learned more in this one session than reading so many books and so many articles, simply because when we start thinking about media in terms of love, all kinds of stuff start to happen. For example, Carolina, like your comment, like, oh my God, I have to think about bodies now, right? And what the body does and doesn't do, and when it's okay and when it's not okay. Or I can imagine things that I could do with my body, with somebody else's body, and it doesn't even have to happen in the real world anymore. It's what Fahad talks about as well, as like when you come from a culture or a country or a region or a family where certain ways of acting or expressing yourself or exploring your identity, whether that's a sexual identity or romantic identity or just personal identity, are not okay or unsafe or not sanctioned, through media, you can. I mean, I'm not ignorant, I'm not naive. You will have to be smart with VPNs and all that kind of stuff, but you can. And so two things are immediately come up, right? So when we talk about media in terms of love, we have to take the body seriously, right? And you know, this is where the affective turn comes from, right? This realization that, oh my God, we've been studying media and communication for almost 100 years and we never talked about anything else but our brains, which is insane. But only recently we've kind of like, oh, right, yeah, there's like when we use media, everything is involved, right? Our whole bodies, there's all kinds of stuff happening when we use media. So that's great. I think that just opens up a Pandora's box of beautiful ideas and insights and you know, feeling uncomfortable and all that. Secondly, that we're constantly talking about transformation, right? I mean, like the moment you start experiencing things in and through media from this perspective of love, things start to change. Like nothing, it's like what Anna says, it's like this, if media are primarily good at invoking or inspiring or accompanying limerence, this involuntary sort of like, oh my God, this is awesome, whatever, this could be a person or a song or, you know, a color, it doesn't matter. And then we have to ask the question, and then what happens next? Because now you have to do something with that involuntary inspiration. And we still use media for all of that, right? Why else are we having social media? I mean, almost everything there is about what happens next after limerence, but okay. So transformation, like we start creating and making things and I think the third point, and then I'll shut up for today, but I think the third point, what was really powerful for me in all of this, and what I've picked up from the question, is that this threesome that we've been talking about, right? That it's a person, a media either as a device or as a code or discourse, or a protocol, name it what you will, and then another, which could be another person, it could be an imagined other, it could be a robot, it could be a text, right? So there's this negotiation going on, and yes, people who make media put all kinds of stuff in there that they, based on an assumption that it will work, right? You know, the way you come up with the matchmaking algorithm for Tinder, or the way you set in place a lovemaking scene in a movie, the way you program certain aspects of gameplay in a game. They're all based on all kinds of assumptions, which are generally wrong. But the fun thing is that, and we know this from the history of innovation in media, is that we generally don't do with media what we're supposed to be doing. Almost none of us is. I mean, whoever reads user manuals, right? So we figure things out on the fly. We mess up things. We buy a new device and we only use 12% of all the available buttons and functionalities. So we just, this notion that the ideas that come into our media based on sort of, well, this is what will make people happy or sad or fall in love or do things, well, they generally don't work, right? And the same with our imaginations. And when they become real, it's like, well, that's not exactly what I imagined them to be. But there's this negotiation going on all the time. And that again reminds me of the third thing. The first one was the body, the second one was transformation, and the third one is that nobody, no player, no actor or actant, to follow actor and actor theory, in the threesome is ever without agency. Mm-hmm. And that's the third sort of insight that I get from looking at things from the perspective of love. And, you know, I don't know about you all, but that makes me terribly excited. There's potential here.
Yes, but the agency is to a large extent interpolated, being, again, super pessimistic, because like of the templates I mentioned, like media come with templates, and the templates interpolate us. And I know I sound very Althusserian, but I mean to be like very like prim and proper cultural studies scholar here. So this is what I definitely want to add, that of course there is some agency, but again, how much of that agency we use. What is interesting, so if I may just cut in, is not our agency as kind of those who use as the users, but technology's agency. And this is where the interest in love with technologies is now going towards and veering off to. To answer the question of Alberta, of course, and to kind of emphasize what Mark has just said, of course, we translate, or I would say transmediate, the love we know onto technological subjects and onto technologies. So what we do, we translate the cultural imaginary and imagery of love onto the devices, onto the kind of the technosphere which is taking over. And of course, you know, that provides us with a very kind of limited vicious circle. We've been recreating what we know, but this is where technologists step in. Why? Because they very often go off script and defy the code. I've been fascinating with the studies in glitch, which are very, very like low-key, and because like because glitch doesn't sell, so companies like Hanson Robotics, with whom I've cooperated, they shut, you know, those glitching devices down. But in one of the experiments, again, done by Ben Goertzel, whom I met in New York, and based on Sophia, which is the most advanced Android nowadays, there is a project, Loving AI, in which it's based on OpenCog, which is very, very deep learning and deep feeling. So the machine learns from emotional interactions with people, and it's kind of amazing to see the reactions when the device glitches, how people are trying to overcome the uncanny valley thing. So it's one point. Another thing, this transmediation of human emotions, which is like transcribing emotionality onto other devices, is to again let us feel differently or understand our emotions differently. For instance, there is a huge project by Matt and Lancet artists based in Amsterdam, EEG Kiss. They are translating kissing, like a couple is kissing them and they are just wired to EEG like equipment. They are translating the kiss into sound and image. We never know just what happens. So it's kind of create a synesthesia for emotions, like we can hear feelings, we can smell feelings. It's simply to try to overcome the human understanding of love, even the human somatic code of loving. So this is kind of this positive, perhaps positive or not, we will see, but like a kind of the light in the tunnel when it comes to corrupting the experience of love with technologies and for technologies. We more and more try to rely on the emotional affective affordances that technologies bring into play, like uncanny valley. We wouldn't know what it is, yes, and here we are, which is like on the way now. We no longer experience it because we are so much very used to technologies, let alone digital natives. They hardly ever get it. Yeah, so this is, I hope that I'm answering your query.
So if it was for me, we would go on and on. So next time I will organize a digital rave, so that because at the end of it, we got to the really, how can I say, the most interesting kind of palpitating questions and topics. And this is normal. It takes a bit of foreplay, even in academic debates, to then really have a proper, to get to the core. And I think that here today we really sort of laid down what are the allays, the thinking paths that we can follow, the role of the body, the relationship with the media, the relationship with the media as other, the relationship with the body of the media, what can be done in this condition of love with the media and technology. And can technology love us? And can technology fuck us, literally and metaphorically? And what do we do with it? And I think that the question of authenticity, corruption, agency, structure, power, control, creativity, hacking, these are questions that are really important when it comes to love. And I will close on sort of on a line that sort of maintain what Mark said, that once you talk about love, it is a bit of a Pandora vase. A lot of questions emerge under a new light. So I think that also scholarly, love as a metaphor, working with love as a metaphor, it's something that that is very, for me at least, is very intriguing. So the positive note of this ending of this seminar, of this dialogue, is that there will be more, and we will talk about all the topics that emerged today. We'll talk about AI, we'll talk about robots, we'll post-human errors, we'll talk about dating apps, we'll talk about also race and gender and discrimination in media love and love through media. So I hope to see some of you, and also you and Anna and Mark there in some occasions. And I hope that this can be just the beginning of a debate that we can, of a journey, of a thinking journey that we can undertake together. And I know we are awfully late, but isn't it the glam thing to do, like starting a bit late, finishing a bit late? So I think we are just on the right side of things. And
you're talking about, so it's always just kind of, good to be late when it comes.
It's good to be late, isn't it? And then another, obviously, people ask super interesting question at the very end. I'm always one of these.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Carolina, for just getting us together. I'm just happy to meet Mark, and I'm very much looking forward to your book, and I'm looking forward to the forthcoming talks. And again, thank you for making me part of this like absolutely stellar lineup. Thank you, the audience, for your patience with us, and yeah, looking forward to more. Thank you, Carolina. It's been an amazingly well curated event.
Thank you very much. I couldn't hope for a better way to kickstart the summer, and yeah, I mean, I really took notes. It's so good to take notes, you know, with like pen and paper. Isn't it a way of loving? No?
Me too.
Love is gone.
Yeah, the note takers.
Thank you so much, Ania and Carolina. This was lovely. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, and see you at the next session. I'll definitely be part of this for the whole way.
Absolutely, and keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Yes, let's keep in touch, everybody. Hope to see you very soon. Thank you very much to Nate, to Catch, for having hosted this as the Center for the Digital, for the director of the Center for Digital Inquiry at Warwick. Here we are, and also it's Nate's birthday, so because now it's late, we can go happy birthday. Thanks for having spent these few hours with us, couple of hours with us, and yes, sadly, but see you soon. We'll meet again.
Good luck and
lots of love.
Bye-bye.